Policy of January 9th, 2023, the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Cherfilus-McCormick, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the minority leader.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material on the subject of the special order hour.
Without objection.
It is with great honor that I rise today to co-anchor the CBC Special Order Hour along with my distinguished colleague, Representative Jonathan Jackson, and also Representative Gwen Moore. For the next 60 minutes, members of the CBC have the opportunity to discuss the importance of the foster care and outcomes among Black families and children involved with child welfare, an issue of great importance to the Congressional Black Caucus, Congress, the constituents we represent, and all of Americans. At this moment, I would like to yield to our Representative Gwen Moore.
Thank you so much, gentlelady from Florida, for heading up this special order hour. At this time, we have many members in the Congressional Black Caucus who are concerned about this issue, and I am so happy this evening that we've also been joined by not only Jonathan Jackson, but by the member of the Ways and Means Committee, a mentor of mine, Dr. Danny Davis, who has served as a social worker and is has kept abreast of those formal studies by engaging and is a passionate about foster youth. And I just want to thank the Congressional Black Caucus for shining a light on this particular issue. Because face it, these are our children. There are about 400,000 children currently in foster care, not counting the ones who are in informal arrangements in foster care. And they are our children. They are children of color, particularly Black children, disproportionately in the system. I, for example, live in Wisconsin, and while Wisconsin is only 9% of the population, almost a quarter of the children in foster care are African American children. And I can tell you, these are the most vulnerable kids in our country, but my God, they are also the most resilient children. But even the most resilient needs our help and our support. And as Congress, we must support them because after all, these youth are our future workforce. They're our workforce, and who will support us if we don't support them? Now, we just left May, and May, of course, was National Foster Care Month. And this year's theme of National Foster Care Month was engaging youth, building supports, and strengthening opportunities. I think that that's a real important theme when as I want to announce happily that we're going to have another Foster Youth Day, Shadow Day. And I would invite all of my colleagues to engage in the extraordinary experience of letting one of these youth shadow you. And you will be surprised that while you think that you're teaching them stuff about your craft as a ranking member, as a chairman, that you will learn so much for these youth. And that will be something that will carry through for the rest of your time serving. It is a blessing. Now, June is National Family Reunification Month. And I think that when we think, we have had foster care system in this country for many years, but one of the things that we have learned is that foster care ought to be the last resort. And that if we separate children from their families because of out of necessity, that we ought to do everything that we can to try to to reunify them and to learn what strategies work toward that effort. We want to make sure, we want to do prevention to make sure that, that these children don't end up being separated from their families. But if they do, we need to prioritize kinship care. You know, one of the co-chairs of this committee is a Republican called Don Bacon, and he is adamant about kinship care and keeping kinship groups together. That is one of his passions, and we need to make sure we support his legislation. We have another co-chair, a Democrat from California, Representative Sidney Kamlager Dove. And as she has come into this Congress, succeeding the now mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, head first onto this issue and is a passionate supporter of our programming. Mary Gay Scanlon, an attorney from Pennsylvania before she joined us in this body, brought those skills and brought her own experience doing a lot of pro bono work for children and families caught in the foster care system. Passionate co-chair of the bipartisan Congressional Caucus on Foster Youth. Nancy Mace, we all know, a person who has served in our armed forces, brings her leadership to this task. And Zach Nunn, another Republican. It's bipartisan that we need to save our children. And so in just a few days, we're going to have the Congressional Caucus on Foster Youth. It's annual Foster Day, and we want members to sign up to pair for a foster youth. I just can't explain how impactful it is for these former foster youth to shadow you for just a day, and how beneficial it is to us as policymakers. And it's a great reminder that beyond these statistics are real people. I have so much to say, but there are others here that want to share. I'd be happy to get into a dialogue or colloquy with you. So I would, Madam Chair of the Special Order, I would yield back to you at this time.
Thank you so much, Representative Gwen Moore. And now I would like to yield to Representative Danny Davis.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and let me commend you and the Congressional Black Caucus for hosting this discussion this evening on what I consider to be one of the most important issues in our country, in our society, and that is taking a hard look at what is happening with our children, and especially those who are in need of care. Focusing on the adage that I've always believed in, and that is that an ounce of prevention is worth much more than a pound of cure. And so it just reminds me of some of the many things that we have championed, trying to make sure that not only do our children receive the care and attention that they need once they're in care, but also trying to prevent them from having to have that experience. And so I was thinking of 2023, that Illinois and the nation benefited from the reauthorization of the MACV program, which I was fortunate to lead. The MACV program funds evidence-based education and services proven to improve mother and child health, family safety, and child development. I helped create this program in 2010, and it has brought over $119 million to Illinois and $5.2 billion to the country to help make families stronger and try and help them to be able to retain their children. I'm also reminded that Illinois and the nation benefited from the Family First Prevention Services Act that I helped enact that made historic improvements to child welfare, fundamentally shifting policy from separating families to strengthening them by addressing the key reasons that families struggle. Illinois has received over $66 million in prevention funding to strengthen families from the law since it was enacted almost 6 years ago. And I'm reminded that Unification Month, what does that really mean? I think it means trying to keep families as connected as we possibly can. And so I want to thank the Illinois Department of Corrections for allowing our Fatherhood Initiative every year to take children to correctional institutions to visit with their fathers. As a matter of fact, we've done that now for about 10 years, and the results are startling in terms of how fathers and children and the children's mothers or significant others or grandparents relate to this experience of, even though their fathers are away, letting the children know that their fathers still have meaning and a great deal of meaning to their lives. And so as we meander our way through trying to figure out how do we really make our world a better place in which to live, how do we provide for those young people? I think of the laws that we've tried to enact and made some progress on, such as helping young people get driver's license, foster youth get driver's license so that they can have transportation services and get from one place to another. The thing I'm very proud that we're close to is providing opportunity for foster youth who have benefits due to them from Social Security, rather than having these benefits go to their payees or go to states for operational expenses. We are getting close to having these benefits come to foster youth themselves, put into a trust fund or something for them when they age out, helping older foster youth. Think of how meaningful it would be for a young person aging out, reaching adulthood, who's never had any real access to resources of their own, having a few $1,000s in a trust fund, or helping them to transition from adulthood so that they now can act like an adult, have their own resources to go to college, have their own resources to help get an apartment, have their own resources to have resources before they get a job and not struggle during this period. So again, I want to commend and thank my colleagues and the Congressional Black Caucus for raising this issue, providing direction, and giving us an opportunity to recognize that the needs are great and we want to make society a better world. I end by thinking of one of my favorite expressions that a poet and blues singer said, and that is that our children are the future. Teach them well. Let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense of pride. And if we can do that, then I am confident that America, our nation, becomes a better place in which to live. So thank you both, and I yield back.
Thank you so much, Representative Davis. I'd like to now yield to myself. Today, I rise to discuss the disparities that Black children and families have within our nation's foster care system. Study after study has shown that Black children in the United States statistically spend more time in foster care and are significantly less likely to be reunified with their families. We have a moral obligation to address the glaring disparities that persist within our child welfare system. Nationwide, the average number of days for children to exit foster care is 633 days. Yet, for Black children, we have an average number of days, which is a staggering 743. In my home state of Florida, the average number of days for Black children to exit foster care is 633 days, which is the largest average number of any racial group. These discrepancies speak volumes about the systemic barriers that hinder the timely reunification of Black children with their families. These numbers represent the extensive damage being done by the children welfare system to the well-being of Black children in Florida and throughout our country. These disparities perpetuate a cycle of instability and trauma and exacerbate existing inequalities, perpetuating a system that is disproportionately affecting communities of color. We cannot afford to ignore these disparities. Each statistic represents a child with hopes, dreams, and a future that should not be denied because of the color of their skin or the shortcomings of the system. We must commit to addressing the systemic issues that disproportionately affect Black children in foster care. Together, we can build a child welfare system that truly supports and nurtures every child, giving them the foundation they need to succeed. I'd like to now yield to my co-anchor, Jonathan Jackson.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to first thank the Honorable Congresswoman from the great state of Florida, the Honorable Sheila Cherfilus-McCormick. Madam Speaker, today I rise because June is National Reunification Month, and we owe it to Black families not to be silent about what the child welfare system has done to them in both tragic and traumatic ways. I say to you today, the effects of having been a devastating and long-lasting on our children, and the fact that we even have to have a National Reunification Month says it all. How could it even be possible that a system that purports to help Black families has been so chiefly responsible for the separation of the very families it supposedly exists to serve? This kind of morose contradiction cannot be allowed to persist and linger, because whether some people in this country are willing to admit it or not, families come in all shapes and sizes. Families come in all colors and configurations. And they even come in various economic conditions and levels of education, but all of them are still families. And all of them deserve our commitment. All of them are depending on the work we do in this chamber. And the members of this body cannot just care about the families that remind them of their own. No matter the race or configuration of a particular family, we are here to serve every family in this country. And whether we care about all American families, or in truth, is it that we only care about some and mostly none? Black families deserve all the rights and opportunities extended to every other family in this country. In fact, considering the historical assault on this country's institutions and policies against Black families, one might even suggest that Black families deserve to have more than most. We have been through a lot. I'm honored to be a member of this congressional body to represent the 1st Congressional District of the state of Illinois. And when I think that of the life of a young child that was kidnapped from West Africa in the name of Phyllis Wheatley in 1753, who was manumitted from slavery in 1773. Our nation has come a long way, but let us never forget a child had been kidnapped that was 8 years of age, and they approximated her age because of the size of her teeth, that had to go up and talk to John Hancock and others, and had to cite poetry that we later came to find out were anagrams, an absolute brilliant child. And she was the first person of African ancestry from 1619 to 1753 to have been manumitted from slavery. And I want us to know that black families are more valuable simply because they've been through so much. And black families just don't have their value because they've been through so much. It's because of the compassion they've had to grow. Not one family is more valuable than the others. We all have different experiences. And sometimes they've had long-lasting and a devastating legacy of neglect that has too often resulted in outright violence. We rise tonight to reflect on the role of this tragic system and how we might strengthen bonds and not just perpetuate historical problems and systemic norms in the child welfare system that has torn so many families apart. I am convinced now more than ever that we must do whatever we can to reduce the need for foster care and strengthen families in whichever configuration they are formed. Until this system of a child welfare can see the value in keeping families together, we must hold the system accountable for what we know to be right. And what we do, we also have to know is the right thing. We know that, yes, every child should be protected, and they still need their mothers and their fathers, no matter the frailty and the conditions that they suffer from. And yes, children should have their basic needs met too, but they still need their grandmothers and grandfathers. Our child welfare system should not separate children. Our child fostering system that's supposed to help feed and nourish children should not separate children under any case. Every child has a brother or a sister, deserves to have a relationship with their brother or the sister they possess. And inasmuch as children should be protected from whoever seeks to threaten their integrity of their lives, it is also the case that no child should be erroneously or permanently separated from people who love them. We must change the economic conditions and political factors that make it even possible for black children to end up not being cared for by their relatives because of a lack of capacity and resources. There's a reason black families are more likely to be investigated by Child Protective Services and to have their children removed and placed in out-of-home care. There is a reason more than 50% of black children in the U.S. will experience a child welfare investigation before their 18th birthday, and 10% of black children will be placed into foster care. These are not accidental occurrences, but rather they are the manifestation of a deep and pervasive systemic bias. Black children spend more time in foster care. Black children have more placements. And yes, black children are less likely to be reunified with their families when somebody needs to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. And since the children of our community cannot speak on the floor of this chamber, tonight we dare to speak for them. Tonight we pick up the standard for their cause and declare emphatically on their behalf, let these children return home to loving families. Let them be treated with respect. Let's give them the presumption of innocence and virtue that they deserve, and let them be reunited with the kindred spirit that produced them and continues to love them in spite of the challenges that they face. This pattern of unjustified investigations and prolonged separations must be brought to an end, not just for the sake of the children, but also for the sake of the nation's future. Unless the children of our community are returned to the loving arms of their family. No child in this country is safe. No child can sleep easily at night. But we will not rest until the circle is restored and until the village can once again decide for itself what is best for our children. So as we work to keep them safe, let us live to make them free. Because the night shines light in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it alone. We thank God for the life, the living, and the legacy of the Honorable Phyllis Wheatley, a child that was separated and was the first to be manumitted, to be freed in America, a child that was kidnapped, that God had born free, that had to have her rights restored as a human being. Madam Speaker, I'd like to now yield my time and thank the Honorable Sheila Cherfilus-McCormick from the great state of Florida for her continued service.
Thank you so much, Representative Jackson, and thank you for your passionate speech and being a great co-anchor. Madam Speaker, today I rise to discuss how historical trauma and systemic racism have perpetuated cycles of intergenerational poverty and have disproportionately impacted the welfare of Black children in America. We must acknowledge a painful truth. By the age of 18, 1 of every 100 children in America will experience the court-ordered termination of their parents' right. This stark statistic is even more alarming for Black children nationwide, who are 2.4 times more likely than their white counterparts to endure the devastating loss of parental rights. In my home state of Florida, Black children are 1.3 times more likely to experience this. These numbers represent the lives of children torn from their families, often due to circumstances rooted in historical and structural inequalities. Historical trauma rooted in centuries of enslavement, segregation, and discrimination continue to echo through generations. Structural racism further exacerbates these challenges, manifesting in biased policies and practices that disproportionately affect Black families in the child welfare system. Intergenerational poverty is both a cause and consequence of child welfare involvement. Families trapped in cycles of poverty face challenges in providing the necessary resources and support for their children. This economic instability often leads to increased scrutiny and intervention from child welfare services, perpetuating a cycle of disruption and disadvantaging. Children have better outcomes in life when they are nurtured and cared for by their own families. We need to reimagine and reform our approach to child welfare to ensure that it is fair, equitable, and supportive of family unity. Our children's future and the future of our nation depends on what we do here today in Congress to redirect and make sure that most children get to stay with their families while protecting the children who need it. Madam Speaker, you've heard from my distinguished colleagues about the foster care system and the issues facing the Black community, all issues of great importance to the Congressional Black Caucus, our constituents, Congress, and all Americans tonight. With that, Madam Speaker, I'd like to yield back.
Does the gentlelady have a motion?
Madam Speaker, I motion to adjourn the House at this time.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye.